Well, hello and welcome back to the Gomer's YouTube channel, where we try to bring you up-to-date news and information on some great wine and spirits that we enjoy, and we hope that you'll enjoy as well. Today, I'm joined by Rich Zellich with Pinnacle Imports. I think a lot of people know Rich from being in the tasting room and some great events and some great products that he brings to us. Um, Today we are going to talk about some wines that are going to be on each of our Thanksgiving table this year in 2020. And we thought that we would share those with you since we're not able to do that as a formal tasting this year, unfortunately. But first, we're going to talk about some sparkling wine and some champagne.
Perfect. Yeah, Thanksgiving is, of course, the most food-focused holiday there is. And so for me, I'm always thinking, how am I going to prepare the turkey, the ham, the roast? We do something a little different every year at my house. And of course, what am I going to drink with that? So Pat and I are going to do a series of videos on Thanksgiving wines. There will be 12 short videos, but I think that sparkling wine and champagne is one of the most versatile pairing wines. The natural effervescence is it's a palate cleanser, and so a lot of different things will work with everything on your holiday table. But we're going to talk about a couple of different wines today. We're going to start with something that's new. This is called Pop Up, and this is made by Charles Smith from Washington State of Kay Vintners fame.
Oh, rock star Charles Smith.
Indeed, the rock star. Just ask him, he'll tell you.
Boy,
he's a rock star.
We love his reds.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to this one.
So this is kind of fun. This is done in a crown cap. You can see that's different from the other stuff, and I'm now putting it all over my lap. That's pretty great.
Bubbles.
Yeah, bubbles. There you go. And it should be a little colder than it is right now. That's why we're getting a little bit of extra bubbles there. But yeah, this is a single vineyard wine. This is from Evergreen Vineyards, where Charles used to make Kung Fu Girl when he owned that wine. This is a vineyard that was planted in 1998 by the Milbrandt family, and this is a true artisan wine. This is made with native yeast fermentation, with all the care that Charles gives all of his higher end wines.
Now, how is for myself and for those that are watching us that aren't familiar with sparkling wine versus champagne, what's the difference?
That's a really good question. There's a couple of important differences, and I hate to say it, we're going to have to break protocol here so we can taste a little bit of wine along with you guys. The first thing to understand is Champagne is a region. It is a region in France, and if the wine does not come from Champagne, it cannot be called Champagne. We used to refer to any sparkling wine in this country as Champagne. It's really not. It is sparkling wine if it doesn't come from Champagne. There are specific grapes that you can use in Champagne, and there is a specific method, and that's what we need to talk about first with this. So this is 100% Chardonnay. This is one of the grapes that is allowed in Champagne. It makes really beautiful champagnes. It's one of the most important grapes. But the difference here is how this is made. When you're making traditional champagne, used to be called the champagne method or méthode champenoise. Champagne is a protected term. Now we just call that the traditional method. When you're doing that, you're going to have your initial fermentation, then you'll blend your wines, then you'll put the wines back in a bottle and do a second fermentation by adding a little yeast, a little juice, a little sugar. It's called a dosage, and you'll put a crown cap, like the Charles Smith wine, back on, and then you will age that wine, and it does a second fermentation in the bottle. Now with this wine or Prosecco, simpler sparkling wines, you do the first fermentation, then the wine goes in a tank, and you'll do a second fermentation in the tank, which remains pressurized, and you just bottle directly from there. So this wine is actually aged for a little bit. A lot of times they aren't, but this is aged for 9 months on the lees. So
Nice.
let's see what we think about this guy here. Charles started with the 18 vintage. This is the 19 that just came out. Very, very fresh. This will be about $17.49 on the shelf here.
Oh, that's nice. That's clean, crisp.
Nice mouthfeel. A little creaminess to it. This is not, it doesn't have the texture that you would get from Champagne. It also doesn't have the price tag that you get from Champagne.
Right.
Again, this is $17.49.
And this is 100% Chardonnay.
100% Chardonnay, all from Evergreen Vineyards in the Ancient Lakes appellation of Washington State. Sustainably farmed. Very, very Charles this. He's actually gotten away from just the black and white. He's starting to put color on his labels. That's kind of interesting to see. So yeah, Pop Up. Look for that coming in the store.
Nice. Very good. Very good. Now, you mentioned that Chardonnay is one of the three grapes that you can make champagne with.
Absolutely. So, and technically there are some little obscurities where you can do other things, but the big ones are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and a grape called a Pinot Meunier as well. And we're going to talk about those grapes a little bit more when we get to the Bollinger. Right now, I want to make sure everybody knows how to properly and safely open a bottle of sparkling wine. I've removed the foil capsule. This is just on top to kind of look pretty, essentially. And underneath that, you're going to have this little wire part here, Pat. This is called a cage.
Okay.
And there'll always be this little part in the back that you have to bend down and untwist. Now, there are multiple ways to open a bottle of champagne. We can saber a bottle of champagne. Pat and I will probably do a video where we show that.
We're not sabering today?
Not today. It's cold outside today. And you don't want to do that inside if you can avoid it. It's a little messy, and you can hurt somebody with the cork. This is the proper way. So you can see I have undone the cage. I'm keeping my thumb, for the most part, on there. And we're going to angle the bottle slightly. I'm not pointing at my friend Pat. And I'm going to hold the cork, but not turn the cork. We're actually going to turn the bottle slowly side to side. And when you feel like the cork is about to push out, sort of stop that, let it go. It was a little louder than I like, but it works. Now you'll see that I'm holding the bottle at an angle here. You want to do that for a few seconds, and then you're ready to rock and roll. Now, if you've just won the Formula One Grand Prix at Monaco, you can shake up the bottle and just let the cork pop out there. But we'd actually like to drink the sparkling wine that we have with us today.
Nice. What if you're racing BMWs in Topeka or something? Can you do the same thing?
They don't let us do that. I think we're lucky if we get a can of Coke for something like that.
Gotcha.
This is pretty special stuff. So you talked about, you mentioned Chardonnay and how important, we talked a little bit about how important Chardonnay is in Champagne. This is a domestic winery, but it's a winery that is making wines in the Champagne method, the traditional method. And this is called a Blanc de Blanc.
Now, what does Blanc de Blanc refer to?
So Blanc de Blanc literally means white from white.
Okay.
So this means it is a white wine made from white grapes. You will sometimes see something labeled as a Blanc de Noir. That means white made from red grapes. So you can make a white sparkling wine from Pinot Noir or Pinot Meunier or any red skin grape, really. You just don't leave the juice in contact with the skins, so it doesn't get any color into the wine. It doesn't leach any pigmentation, so it's still a white wine.
Nice.
But in this case, this is a Blanc de Blanc. It's white from white. And this is kind of where this winery, Schramsberg, really made its name. This is an old winery. This is, I think, one of the first 20 bonded wineries in California. And it was founded by a guy who's not American, a guy from Germany named Jacob Schramm in 1862. And his wines, called Schramsberg, were pretty well known. They were apparently really wonderful wines. Shortly after he passed away in the early 1900s, the winery ceased to exist, and essentially it was just the home and the caves were still there, but it wasn't being used as a winery. And in 1965, a husband and wife, Jack and Jamie Davies, were looking for a retirement home and found this really charming place that happened to have these old vineyards and actually the first underground caves that had been dug for wine in California. And they decided what they would do is make California's sparkling wine, the best sparkling wine you could possibly make. And in 1965, they were the first people domestically to do a Blanc de Blanc using Chardonnay as a base grape. There were other sparkling white wines in California, but they tended to be made from a variety of different things, a lot of which are not the quality that Chardonnay can produce.
Wow. So they've been doing this for 52 years.
Yeah,
53, 54 years then.
It's a pretty amazing winery. So not only were they the inventors of this Blanc de Blanc style in 65, 2 years later they were the first people, or not the inventors, but the first people in California to do this. 2 years later in 1967, they were the first people to do a Blanc de Noir using Pinot Noir as a grape. And they're all wonderful wines. Everything from Schramsberg is single vintage. It is vintage designated. Okay. That means all the fruit is from one harvest. And we'll kind of talk about how that differs from non-vintage champagne and sparkling wine in a little bit. The pop-up is a single vineyard wine, a single vintage wine. That's 2019. Schramsberg, we're on the 2017 vintage now. This has not been reviewed yet. This was just released, but this wine tends to score in the low 90s from a lot of the really important critics. This is a bottle of wine that's on your shelf for $34.49. Right. So this has a lot of the character of champagne. It is made in the champagne method, the method traditionnel, but it does not come from Champagne. It comes from California, so it is not champagne.
Right. Very cool. What if I bought this for Thanksgiving this year, and it's a 2017 vintage, and we didn't drink it, and it got shoved to the back of the wine cellar or the wine rack or the shelf, whatever we use at home to store our wine in. Mm-hmm. I left it there, and it was next year or 2 years or 10 years.
With this wine, you're totally fine. These wines actually do age really nicely. Now, this is not something you want to put aside for 20 years, I don't think. But it is a wine that will hold. And these are really pretty special wines. These wines were the first domestic wines to be served, domestic sparkling wines to be served at an official White House function. Oh. It was during Nixon's historic Toast to Peace in 1969, I believe, the year I was born. And they've been served at the White House every year since then. It's pretty cool. 51 years now.
Nice. A little bit of American history there.
Absolutely. No, and Thanksgiving is a distinctly American holiday. I think it makes total sense to have a distinctly American wine.
Yeah.
Now we are going to do one more wine today. This is called Bollinger Special Cuvée. This is true champagne, and again, I've removed the foil capsule. I'm untwisting the cage. It's in a counterclockwise manner, 6 turns, keeping my thumb over that cork and turning the bottle slowly side to side. I can feel the cork is already wanting to come out. So I'm going to stop turning the bottle, try and control it with my thumb. Keep the bottle tipped over that way for a few seconds.
Nice.
And we're ready to drink some Bali.
Good job. Now with this, you said this is Bollinger Special Cuvée.
Yeah, Special Cuvée. That's
what does that mean?
It's a really good question. So this is a non-vintage wine, and initially this would have just been referred to as Bollinger non-vintage, or the French term, and you don't want to hear me try and speak French. It's horrible. And in the early 1900s, I believe, Bollinger's British agent for selling these said, that name really doesn't do it justice. This should be called something great. This is special. So Georges Bollinger decided to call this Special Cuvée. So this is the name of Bollinger's, I guess you could say, entry-level non-vintage cuvée. But entry-level makes it sound like this isn't special, and it really is, for a couple different reasons. The first is, if you smell this, you're going to get a very different nose from the last couple of wines.
Much different. Much different.
Bigger, it's richer, it's a little toastier.
There's a lot more going on in the glass with this than there was the other two.
Absolutely. Part of that is that Bollinger uses a lot of Pinot Noir. They are known as the Pinot Noir house in Champagne. They wrote their own Charter of Excellence, and in that, one of the things that they stated they would always do is use Pinot Noir as the base grape. So every one of their cuvées has at least 60% Pinot Noir. So this is, I believe, 65% Pinot Noir, 25% Chardonnay, and the balance Pinot Meunier for this disgorgement. It's important to understand a little bit about how champagne is made, especially by the Grand Marques, the big houses, and which Bollinger is one of the grandest of the grand. There's a reason James Bond always wanted to drink this. And one of the things these guys do that's a little bit different from most champagne houses is a lot of the big marques are buying from hundreds, or in some cases thousands, of small growers. About 147 hectares, I believe, vineyards are actually owned by Bollinger, and so that gives them a lot more control over the quality of that fruit. And I believe 85% of their wines are either Grand Cru or Premier Cru vineyards going into even this wine. So we're already talking about better quality juice. We're talking about Pinot Noirs, the house style, which tends to give a little more red fruit, a little more broadly shouldered wine. Mm-hmm. But then there's more to that. Bollinger actually employs a master cooper. A cooper's a barrel maker, and he doesn't build barrels. He is responsible for taking care of the barrels. I believe they have about 3,500 barrels. Most of those are over 60 years old, and some of those are 100 years old. So these are very prized. They're very neutral barrels. You don't get oaky characteristics on the nose here. Those old barrels aren't adding vanilla or mocha or anything, but Bollinger believes that helps the wine breathe a little bit more. Something else that makes this really important is Bollinger actually uses a pretty decent amount of reserve wines, and their reserve wines are stored in this crazy way. I was there a couple of years ago in the cellars and was struck by how many magnums they had there. They had about 700,000 magnums of wine. It turned out that's the reserve wines. So a lot of times if you're buying somebody's non-vintage champagne, you're having stuff that's from a vintage or two ago, maybe, and that's it. So Bollinger stores all of their reserve wines from their, which are only Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. They do a little Pinot Meunier, but that's not ever kept in magnums. So they will bottle magnums of the best wine every year, and they will keep those from 5 to 15 years. And they blend about 5 or 10% of those into special cuvee every year. Now, it's a lot of magnums. They'll do about 3 million bottles of this per release. And the cellar team, it's a team of 7 people, and they will disgorge by hand every one of those magnums. It's 75 to 80,000 magnums by hand to make each release of special cuvee, and that process takes a team of 7 about a month.
Wow.
And it's pretty amazing. And then, so these wines tend to be a little older. They are... aging them in the magnums under cork keeps them very, very fresh. And so you get wines that I actually think, we were talking about how long can you age wines, even though this is a non-vintage wine, which usually I drink pretty early, you can hang on to these for 5 to 10 years and they get round and really beautiful.
It's really nice.
I think Oscar Wilde said only the truly unimaginative can fail to find a reason to drink champagne. Man, he was right. The nice thing is we're getting ready to go into November, and this wine's actually going to be on sale. So, Pat, this is normally $78.99 on your shelf. What's this going to be when it's on sale?
$69.49.
$69.49. So almost $10 a bottle. That's for one of the great champagnes, certainly the greatest, I think, non-vintage champagne cuvee you can get. That's kind of a steal.
Yeah,
so,
nice. Cheers.
I will be having another glass of that after the camera is off, I think.
Right.
So, Pat, thank you very much for having me here. Everybody, thank you for watching. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video.